Ashley. Well, good evening, folks. I am going to call the Wednesday, April 17th meeting of the Farmville Planning Commission to order. Thanks to those that have joined us in person and to those that are joining us online. As we look at our agenda, we will have our call to order. Ms. Watkins.
Mr. Patterson,
Present.
Mr. Davenport,
Here.
Dr. Miller,
Here.
Ms. O'Connor,
Here.
Mr. Weiss,
Here.
Mr. Crute.
You have the agenda before you. If there are any additions, please share those. If not, we'll take a motion to approve.
I move that we approve.
Second.
It's been moved in second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Consideration of the minutes. You have before you the minutes from the January 17th, 2024 meeting of the Planning Commission. Having looked at the minutes, are there any additions or corrections?
I move to approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
It has been moved in second to approve the minutes from January 17th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We have now reached the public participation portion of the meeting. This is general comment that folks would like to make before the Planning Commission. Is there anyone that has signed up tonight?
No, sir.
Is there anyone in the audience who would care to participate in the public comment portion? Cool. We will move forward. We have a request for the adoption of resolution number RES 24-001, initiating amendments to the Farmville Town Code, Chapter 29, zoning and subdivision to add fences. And I will read the resolution that is before us for consideration. So whereas from time to time, amendments to ordinances are needed to recognize current conditions and land use practices, and whereas the Farmville Planning Commission adopted June 10th, 2020, and whereas the Farmville Comprehensive Plan adopted June 10th, 2020, maintains that low and moderate density residential areas should support transportation by both car and on foot. And whereas Section 29-14.A.2.A 1.B of the Farmville Town Code and 15.2-22867 of the Code of Virginia allow the Farmville Planning Commission to initiate amendments to the zoning ordinance. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Farmville Planning Commission hereby initiates the ordinance amendment process pursuant to the appropriate local ordinance and statutory authority for the zoning text amendment ZTA 24-002 for the amendment of section 29-62.D.9.D of the town code for specific sidewalk construction regulations in section 29-13.E.4.C of the town code to add sidewalk construction regulations to the site plan requirement.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I believe you just read the resolution for the next agenda item,
Man,
which I guess we can just skip to and come back to this one. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Thank you for that. All righty, so we've got the resolution before you, and this is for the sidewalk. So just kind of reversing our consideration for the evening. Any questions? Take a motion when there is.
I do have one minor question. Reading through it, I'm glad it's short and concise. Just to clarify, so the front setback, there would be a setback on the fences is the intent of this, not in the back or side yards. Is that correct, how this is written?
I don't think we're doing this one. We're not doing that.
We're doing sidewalks right now.
Sidewalks.
Yep. Okay.
I'll make a motion that we, what are we doing here? We're accepting this resolution, initiating amendments to the Farmville Town Code, Chapter 29, zoning and subdivision to add sidewalks for residential districts.
I'll second that.
It has been moved in second. Ms. Watkins?
Ms. O'Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. Davenport,
Yes.
Mr. Patterson,
Yes.
Mr. Crute, Dr. Miller.
Yes.
Perfect. The resolution has been adopted to initiate amendments. So for those watching online, we will now move back to point 6 on the agenda, which is a request for the adoption of resolution number RES 24-001, initiating amendments to the Farmville Town Code, Chapter 29, zoning and subdivision to add fences. And I'm going to read the resolution before us. A resolution initiating amendments to the Farmville Town Code, Chapter 29, zoning and subdivision to add fences. Whereas from time to time, amendments to ordinances are needed to recognize current condition and land use practices. And whereas the Farmville Department of Community Development has found the need for standards for use of fences in residential districts. And whereas Section 29-14.A.2.A 1.b of the Farmville Town Code and 15.2-22867 of the Code of Virginia allow the Planning Commission to initiate amendments to the zoning ordinance. Now therefore be it resolved that the Farmville Planning Commission hereby initiates the ordinance amendment process pursuant to the appropriate local ordinance and statutory authority for zoning text amendments, ZTA 24-001, for the amendment of Section 29-235-B of the Town Code for standards for specific uses. Any questions about the resolution before you?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. I
Yes.
wonder if at the end of the resolution, in the now therefore paragraph, if some words are missing, is it supposed to say for specific uses of fences in residential districts? Instead of just ending with specific uses. In other words, track the language in one of the earlier whereas clauses.
So the code section is titled specific uses.
Okay, but this is about specific uses of fences, correct?
Right, but
Okay.
it refers to the actual code section.
Right,
The standards for specific use is the code section.
understood. I don't know how that,
Amending, right?
what, pardon?
That's what that's what we're amending. So that's why it's just specific uses.
I think what she's saying is Section 29-35.b, that it's titled standards for specific uses. So we're just kind of laying in what's laid out in the code.
I was just trying to be consistent, trying to be consistent with what we just did on the previous resolution, where it spelled that out. I'm fine with it if you're fine with it.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, so back to the question about the intent of the language here is there would be a front setback with the front setback of the already existing structure or a normal front setback. The back and rear yards wouldn't have a setback. Correct.
I think we'll get to that during the public hearing, when we do the staff report, and any questions that come up from Planning Commission will be answered at that time.
We just got to adopt the process to start doing that, Jerry.
Okay.
Cool. Unless there are any other questions, would love a motion to approve the resolution to get going.
So moved.
Second?
It has been moved and second that we adopt the resolution initiating amendments to the Farmville Town Code, Chapter 29, zoning and subdivision to add fences. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We can get back in the regular order of things. So looking at item 8 on your agenda, we are doing the public hearing ZTA 24-001 for fences. A public hearing for the Planning Commission recommendations to amend the zoning ordinance by adding section 29-25.b.5 fences. This will regulate the location and height of fences in residential districts. Vote for public hearing. Now.
Just open the public hearing.
Yep, so is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved and second to open the public hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Perfect. We'll start with a staff report.
Thank you. In 2020, after several months of input and deliberation, the town of Farmville adopted new zoning and subdivision ordinances and a comprehensive plan. With this new ordinance came landscaping requirements that were specifically for developments or redevelopments that required approved site plans, properties that were seeking rezoning in certain districts, and for properties looking for conditional use permits in certain districts. In those districts, walls and fences were listed in the code section with requirements for location and maintenance. Over the last few years, staff has received numerous calls questioning height and placement of fences in the R1 and the R2 zoning districts. In comparison of other jurisdictions' fence regulations, staff determined the lack of standards for height and location of fences was undesirable and therefore included standards that would be relevant to residential zoning districts for fences. To more clearly state this, the staff proposes amendments to Article 4, Section 29-35B of the zoning ordinance to add more specific regulations regarding the height and placement of fences. The amendment adds Section 2935B5 fences. Attachment 1 is a red line version of this ordinance showing these amendments. Do you want me to go over the amendments, or do you just want to ask any questions that you had about the amendments?
I think it'd be helpful to just walk through.
So the amendment is to add fences. Fences between a street and front building line shall not be more than 4 feet in height, except as required in specific zoning district regulations. For the purpose of determining the required front yard setback for fences, the required front yard shall be the established front yard setback for the applicable district or the actual setback of the primary building wall of the structure in the case of a non-conforming front yard setback. Fences along the rear lot line or along a side lot line to the rear of the required front setback line may be erected to a height not exceeding 8 feet. Fences shall not impair vehicular or pedestrian visibility. In the case of corner lots in all districts, no fence shall be erected that blocks or otherwise impedes the view of streets or traffic. And finished sides of any fence shall face the street and/or adjoining properties. That was the list of regulations. I can field any questions at this time.
Any questions on the staff report?
So the intent, though, is the setback front yard, the setback for the structure would be maintained for fences. And then in the back and rear yard, there would be no setback.
They would still have to meet the setbacks of the district for a structure. But in the front yard, it would have to be 4 feet or lower in height.
So a rear yard, so if you had a 35-foot setback off of the town's line, your fence would have to be 35 feet off of that line.
That's the code as written, and we don't address coming any closer to the front yard setback.
But it seems to me here, like, the way I'm interpreting this is that as long as the fence is 35 feet back in R1 and R2, then it can be like, no, then it can be up to 8 feet. Like, I guess I read this as saying that any fence that's between, you know, the sidewalk or the road and 35 feet has to be 4 foot. But if it's 35 foot and back, even if it's in the front yard, then it can be up to 8 feet, right?
Can you say that again?
Yeah, can I try, I think I understand what the confusion is, but correct us if we're wrong here. There are two different measurements going on here. One is just the height of the fence. You know, the front fence being 4 feet high and side and back being 8 feet, right?
Correct.
Okay. The other measurement is where that fence is placed, and it can't be any closer than the required setback lines, the respective setback lines, front, side,
Correct.
rear, right?
Right.
Okay, so if the front setback line is 35 feet, the fence can be on that setback line, that imaginary line, can't be closer to the road,
Correct.
could be farther back too. But I think John's question is, if it's farther back, say close to the house, can it be a taller fence?
No,
If I understood
because
your question.
it would still be between the building line and the street. So anything between the street and the front building line.
But building line's a setback, right? Just so we're making sure we're talking about the same thing?
So then the description is what is a building line, and the front yard is the established front yard setback of the applicable district or the actual setback of the primary building wall. So if the structure is within that setback, then the side fence can be 8 feet starting at that structure. But they wouldn't be allowed a front fence because they're already in the setback.
I thought, and forgive my ignorance, I thought a setback is like where you could, like the foremost part of the lot, the property, where you could start building.
Correct.
Okay, so that, okay, so if that's 35 foot, and then like say you hang a fence off to the sides of your front, the front of your home, that would be 35 feet back from the road or the sidewalk. And so you're saying that that fence would still have to be no more than 4 foot tall?
As long as it's in that front yard, no more than 4 feet tall.
So even if it's like the property's 100 foot back from the line, it still can only, the front fence can only be 4 foot tall?
Ashley, here I go again on missing words, so pardon me, but I wondered, in that clause that we keep talking about, the required front yard shall be, that phrase, is the word setback missing from there? The required front yard setback should be? You see where I'm looking? It's the second line of that clause A1. It says the required front yard shall be the established front yard setback. And I'm wondering if the word setback is missing after front yard.
We did definitely add that.
Well, it's a question of intent and meaning. It seems like that's really what we're talking about, is where the required fence setback is. We're not talking about a required front yard square area, right? Okay. So I think that might help clarify things.
May I ask a question about why only 4 foot? I mean, like for instance, if I, was to have a pool off the side of my house, I'd want to put like a 6 or 8 foot fence just for privacy as well as security and safety. And if I'm within the setback or even further back from the setback, I guess like what's the, what problem is a 4 foot fence trying to solve? The maximum 4 foot fence trying to solve?
The view of the property from the street, to make sure somebody does not put a 6 to 8 foot fence in the front front yard, so then you're not viewing the house. So police, fire, rescue, they have view of the structure.
So ideally, well, there's a couple things to address here. The setback in the rear and side would not apply to a fence. It would just be the right-of-way line. You could build a fence on the right-of-way line or right off the right-of-way line, correct? Because I'm not reading that in the way that this is written. A addresses front yard, and item 1, so A1 addresses the setback for fence. B addresses fences alongside and backyard, and it doesn't have an item 1, like B1 below it, for setback for rear and side. Because I can envision plenty of properties around that have small, especially in the higher density areas, that have small backyards where the yard space really is what you're trying to fence in. So ideally, I want to make sure it's clear that back and side yards aren't required to meet that same setback.
So currently, a structure and a fence is considered a structure, has to meet the setbacks. So 35 feet, depending on the roadside, the road size, from either the property line or the center of the street. And then side yards, depending on the district, are between 15 and 7 feet. And rear yards are, I think, 25 in most districts.
No, not the right-of-way line, the setback line from the right-of-way line.
So the front yard setback is either 35 feet, depending on the road width, from the town property line or from the center of the street.
If it has to do with rear and side yard setbacks, I can't go along with this. Because the smaller districts, there's no way you could fence in a backyard in them where it's high density.
Yep. So I want you to hold that thought. I think it'd probably be best to go to public comment, and then we'll come back and continue our deliberation. So, Ms. Watkins, is there anyone that has signed up for public participation?
No, sir.
Okay. To those in the audience, if you'd like public participation, folks have 3 minutes to make statements related to this public hearing. So I do want to give the opportunity.
Excuse me, sir.
Yep.
I do have one written statement. My apologies.
Excellent.
This statement is from Tom Dennison, town resident, and he wants to first speak to ZTA 24-001 fences. And he's asking the Planning Commission to please consider neighborhood fence clutter, fire department access, fence maintenance access, dressy side out, visibility into property by police cruiser.
Thank you. One last call from the audience. Perfect. Well, we can come back and continue deliberation. Brett.
So let me see if I can put this in plain English and say what this is in part trying to prevent. Am I understanding right, Ashley, that, focusing on front yard just for a moment, the fence cannot be on the front property line? If you wanted to fence your front yard, you can't have a fence wherever your property line meets the town's right-of-way, correct? That fence has to be a certain distance back, and what staff is proposing is that distance back is the front setback line, which would apply in that district.
Well, that's not implied here because that's already in the code under our bulk regulations with a structure being built on a property. Because currently a fence is a structure, and by
Right.
definition, it has to meet our setbacks.
So this is adding just about the height of the fence? So whatever the current code requires for setback, this is just limiting how high the fence can be. However, wherever that fence is placed, it can only in the front yard be 4 feet high. So to John's point, if, say, you have a swimming pool off to the side of the house, but still visible from the front, right? That fence can still only be 4 feet high, if I understood your question correctly. right, versus a higher privacy fence.
Once you pass the front line of the building, or you pass that, the setback line, once you get past that, for a side yard, you can go up to 8 feet. So if a pool most likely would be built in the rear and not,
I mean, it depends on where you have space to put it, but, so what you're saying, if the pool is off to the side and you're on the street just looking at the house and see the pool, the fence that comes in toward the house from the side can be 8 feet, not limited to 4, even though
As long as
you're
it-
viewing it from the front.
as long as it matched the line of the house, the building line.
When you say building line, you mean where the facade of the house
The
is?
structure, the line of the
Right.
structure. So if you were to take that structure and just extend that
Mm-hmm.
line, anything behind that structure can be 8 feet.
Okay. So again, if I'm on the street looking at the house and there's a pool off to the left or the right, the fence that blocks my view of the pool from the front, based on your interpretation of this wording, could be 8 feet tall, not 4 feet.
As long as it doesn't go in front of that house,
Yeah, right, just
Right.
extending the facade
just
to the
extend the
side.
facade, yeah.
Okay, so it's not just 8 feet going along the side property line, it could be 8 feet from the side property line coming in
To the
to the
house.
facade.
Right.
Okay. I guess I'm with John why that question would come up, is it's not clear to me that would be allowed. I would have interpreted the way John did, that it would be a 4-foot limitation, not 8.
Yeah, can we get some language? Can we rephrase this? Do you think it'd be prudent to rephrase this to clarify that?
Yeah, because I think you're just gonna, the town's gonna invite questions and hopefully not controversy, but at least, just confusion over what can be 4 feet and what can be 8 feet. And the other point about the backyard too, I could see where you might not even be able to put a fence, or in the side yard too, based on maybe a non-conforming lot or where the I'll call it the home is.
Right.
Versus where the property lines are.
So it sounds like we'd also want some language to say that you could build to the property line and not just the setback.
I would, definitely for the side and the back. I also have a question about 8 feet, and is that kind of the standard, or it seems very high to me?
Versus 6?
Versus 6, yeah.
I looked at like 6 different ordinances, and it was kind of back and forth between 6 and 8. We kind of felt like 6 might be a little too restrictive in height, so we went with the taller fence in the rear inside.
I guess it's better to give them a max and nobody has to build it that tall, so.
There was a suggestion on my left side about some additional language. Are folks ready to offer that suggestion, or is more time needed to think through that? Okay. Perfect. You want a motion on the defer? Cool. Is there a motion to do that?
Mr. Chairman, I'll try. I'll move that we accept the proposed amendment with the further clarification about the fence height running from the side property lines to the facade of the house, that they're allowed to be 8 feet tall as well, up to 8 feet tall. I think that's I may not be particularly artful in my word choice, but I think that's the intent
Yep.
of the discussion.
Is there a second to the motion?
Appending,
Yeah, the other one.
yeah, appending to that clarification that structure setbacks wouldn't be required for fences in rear and side yard. Front yard, I'm comfortable with the front yard the way it's stated. I think, well, I'm comfortable with the way it's stated. Nobody else said anything, so. Appending to that.
Yes. with what has been offered by Mr. Rhett and Mr. Jerry. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Ms. Watkins, would you like a roll call on that?
Before I do a roll call, can we clarify, are we deferring the case, or are we moving forward with the case with the revisions?
The latter, I thought.
Yeah, I personally think we need to, once we take that language offered, make the tweak. I think it's probably better to bring it back
Okay,
to take the final
so
action.
we are deferring.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Could you please make that motion and that action, please, to defer?
Mr. Chairman, I move to defer this agenda item to the next meeting to give staff an opportunity to revise the language to reflect our recommendations.
Perfect.
Please don't make me repeat specifically what those recommendations were.
Second.
Ms. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Weiss?
Yes.
Mr. Davenport?
Yes.
Mr. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Crute? Dr. Miller?
Yes.
Alrighty. So I guess we need to have a motion to close that public hearing.
I'll move we close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Alrighty, item 9 on our agenda, public hearing ZTA 24-002 sidewalks. Public hearing for Planning Commission recommendation to amend regulations contained in section 29-62.d.9.d sidewalks to require dedication of land, construction of sidewalks in residential districts R1, R2, R3, and to amend section 29-24.e.4.c to require the construction of sidewalks for projects that must submit a site plan. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor of opening public hearing ZTA 24-002 sidewalks signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Staff report.
So in the current code, sidewalks are listed under our subdivision ordinance, which only requires sidewalks when a subdivision has occurred in a B1, B2, or P3 zoning district. We have had several projects come about and have tried to ask for sidewalks and have been turned down. And we want to keep with our comprehensive plan recommendation that major streets should be redesigned with sidewalks and other pedestrian amenities over the long term, and that we should provide full pedestrian connections. So staff proposes amending Article 6, Section 29-62 D9D to require 5-foot sidewalks for the R1, R2, and R3 districts, in addition to the B1, B2, and B3 districts when subdividing. And we'd also like to amend Article 2, Section 2913 E4C to require the construction of a 5-foot sidewalk along streets or roadways leading to a facility for any plan that requires an approved site plan, for any project that requires an approved site plan. I can read the attachment for the amendment. And what we would do would be to strike "and" in Article 6 subdivisions and add R1, R2, and R3. And then we would amend Section 2913 E4C and add 16, construction of a 5-foot sidewalk along the street or roadway leading to the facility. I can take any questions at this time.
Any questions regarding the staff report? Well,
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Ashley, the last amendment, the one about, item 16, adding that subsection 16, what is the facility? I looked at that code section. Yeah, the same question. I looked at the overall code section. I didn't see it mentioned elsewhere, other than like sewer, sewer and water pipeline facilities, that kind of thing. So what is that a reference to? The very end of that amendment, to the facility?
Basically, the facility would be any development. So if it's a new restaurant, any type of new structure.
Okay, so is there, is that a better way to say what staff is trying to accomplish versus just saying construction of a 5-foot sidewalk along any street or roadway shown in the site plan? Wherever the streets and roads are going, it is just to say, build a sidewalk wherever you're building a street.
We could change it. I wouldn't want it to be like a private street and then it not be in a public street, so they wouldn't run the sidewalk because it wasn't a town street.
But that limitation isn't there now. It just says the street or roadway leading to the facility. So it doesn't distinguish between private or public now.
We
So-
can take it out if you
Yeah.
prefer.
Well, it's really a question for the, what the staff is trying to accomplish here. It seems like if we're trying to encourage sidewalks to be built, they just should be built along any new road or street.
When I read it, I envisioned, because it specifically talks about that need an approved site plan. I envisioned potentially undeveloped pieces of the property that may not have that requirement. That's how I was reading it.
Right, but if a road is being built as part of a site plan, I'm just wondering why whatever it means, the facility, why limit it to that instead of just building a sidewalk wherever we're building a new road? It's partly, I guess, a policy question. What are we really trying to accomplish here?
In 9 in that section, there's no facility, the word facility isn't, well, there's water and sanitary sewer facilities. But in number 9 in that section, it says number of floors, floor area, height, and location of each building, and each proposed general use for each building. And so I was wondering, if for that proposed language, should be the street or roadway leading to, each building or a building? Or does that create more ambiguity?
If you want to change it to and leading to the structure,
I guess I was just looking for, because I got confused by the facility. And so like you, I was like, well, what if there's multiples,
I guess subject to input from the public on this, my thinking is I would just recommend that we make it clear, unless there's a reason not to, make it clear that wherever there's a new street or roadway being proposed in the site plan, there's a sidewalk along that proposed road or street. Just make it simple and
So
straightforward.
just to clarify what you're saying, for me, in changing that, is your thought that you don't want to just limit it to the new structure being built?
Right, because what I'm envisioning is the possibility, let's just say it's a small subdivision, and to Jerry's point, maybe just a few homes are going to be built, but the road is being installed through the whole tract.
Okay.
Because it makes more sense to go ahead and build the road at one time instead of in segments. And so the road may lead to nowhere, so to speak, but it's not going to be nowhere forever. There's going to be a need to extend that sidewalk too, and more houses along that same road. It's just an example. I can conjure up other examples, but it just seems like the clearest, most straightforward way to address the objective here is just to say, if you're building a road, you're building a sidewalk next to it.
So your suggestion is drop off and leading to the facility, just so it says construction of a 5-foot sidewalk along the street or roadway.
Shown on the site plan. Yeah, yes, exactly. Just, so after roadway, it would say, as shown on the site plan,
Okay.
or proposed on the site plan.
Well, let's hold that thought.
so
Well,
let me make a comment really quick. So this section is for things that are kind of already in an area that has been developed and you're looking to make sure they carry out that sidewalk. It's not in a subdivision. So this, for an example, would be if somebody were to develop somewhere on South Main Street on a vacant lot, that they would have to put in sidewalk for their new development, not a this section is not for a subdivision. This is for an area that has already been subdivided.
Okay, but you can have subdivided land that isn't improved upon. It could be undeveloped subdivided land, right?
Yes, but if they're going through the subdivision process, now they'd have to build sidewalks. This still wouldn't require a residential home, the second section. If they were to develop a residential home in the avenues, they would not have to build a sidewalk because that does not require a site plan. So site plans are basically your commercial properties.
So whatever the example I'm just trying to make it clear and clean that if a road is being built as part of the site plan, for whether it's commercial or otherwise, that a sidewalk would be built along with the road. Unless there's a reason you can think of not to have a sidewalk when they're building the road.
No, we want them to have a
Right.
sidewalk. That's
Exactly.
the
Right.
whole purpose of the ordinance.
Exactly, so it seems like this would accomplish that purpose very clearly, what I'm suggesting.
We'll hold that thought. We'll turn to Ms. Watkins if we've got folks that have signed up for public participation.
No one has signed up, but I do have a public comment from Tom Dennison. He is a Farmville resident. He wants to speak to ZTA 24-002 sidewalks. He wants to ask the Planning Commission to please consider, for uniformity, that the town installs the sidewalks, example, water and sewer connections. Americans with Disability Act, follow the grade of the street/curb. Selective enforcement if requiring walks where no other exist.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that cares to sign up? Cool. We can continue. Do you have one, Abby?
Yeah, I had a question. Are there, I don't know, standards for what sidewalks are like? And one of the things, there was a, something we looked at a long time ago with a duplex, I believe, that was changing the location, and we talked about having to have where the mailboxes could go or something, but having that border between the street and where the sidewalk begins so that there is a space to put mailboxes or whatever, and it's not like Perry Street where you got a mailbox post coming up in the middle of the sidewalk. And again, thinking about ADA compliance, that, you know, we've got some places here in town where it's kind of odd, the things that come out of the middle of the sidewalk, and you couldn't get around in a wheelchair if you had to.
Are you,
I'm just
wanting-
wondering if there's some way to make sure that any new sidewalks aren't built right up on the edge of the road. And I don't know if that's if there's a VDOT thing or anything about that applies here.
is that a consideration that we would take into account here, or is that a staff kind of helping to facilitate that?
Are you looking for like a buffer, another strip between the street and the sidewalk? If that's something that the Planning Commission decides they want to add, I think that's gonna make it more difficult to give up more than 5 feet. So right now, we're asking for 5 feet for a sidewalk. If we add an 18-inch strip, we're gonna get to asking for 6.5 feet. And then making sure they maintain the grass.
A site plan review would have the opportunity, if it was reasonable or feasible to do that, is to request that sidewalk to be placed for an easement in between.
Yes, but if there's already existing sidewalks, you don't want to make them put that buffer if the adjoining sidewalks don't have it.
I mean, I could go either way on it, because I kind of see what you're saying. You almost want to start making that indication there, but I think there's so many places where it might not be feasible and reasonable, especially if the mailboxes aren't on the sidewalk or street side anyway, if there's not a need for the easement there.
Well, there's like things when they put sidewalks in going up Longwood Avenue. There's power poles and things coming up out of the middle of the sidewalk. And it just, if you've ever dealt with somebody in a wheelchair and you try to get around this town, it's not easy. So that's all.
My thought is this is a good start to it if I think a simple start to it here. But
Yeah, no,
I
it's-
agree
it's
with what you're
better.
saying.
I just didn't know if there was any standards that we already had, that when sidewalks went in, they had to have a buffer or anything like that. That was my wish.
I do want to come back just with the previous conversation on 16, having heard response from staff. Are there any further thoughts about the desire to amend that sentence? And I think if folks feel spirited to offer a motion, we'll take that.
So if I'm hearing, I understand what you're saying about the site plan, and I concur with that, but you're saying that's not actually necessary, and we can make sure everybody, every potential use, every potential circumstances is covered if we just say construction of a 5-foot sidewalk along the street or roadway, period.
We can do that.
I'm asking.
Just to say that for any site plan, construction of a 5-foot sidewalk along the street or roadway.
I understand why you're taking out the limitation. My concern, the reason I suggested it, and maybe I don't have this in the right context, is we could have a situation where, because the town's largely developed already, there's already a road, maybe the road's being extended into this to-be-developed area, and the current road may not have the sidewalk. But, there's now a new section of road being built. So if we don't reference the site plan, are we then requiring the developer to basically backtrack and put a sidewalk where there isn't one now along the road? And he wasn't responsible for that early development. So I thought but maybe I'm wrong, I just thought the context here was a site plan approval process. That staff was trying to approve a site plan and considering it. And so whatever's been developed is already done. We're now developing something new. Is that the right context? Okay. And so I just was trying to be fair to the developer, not to make the developer have to go backwards and put in a sidewalk where maybe in hindsight we wish one had been there, but it's not.
So do you look at the "and leading to the facility" as a limitation?
Not only limitation, but an ambiguity, because we're not sure what it's even referring to.
It's also, it's an addition to, so they have to have the sidewalks along the street or the roadway, and then they also would have to have a sidewalk leading to the structure. So as an example, a new restaurant, there would be a sidewalk coming off of the sidewalk on the road going to that facility.
I see. So we're talking about basically two types of sidewalks, one along the road and one
Leading
basically
in.
Perpendicular from the road to the building,
Whatever
whatever.
structure it
Yes,
is.
right, okay. And that makes sense. I just hadn't read it that way. So maybe then what we say is a 5-foot sidewalk along the street or roadway and a whatever width sidewalk, still 5 feet, leading to the facility, to the buildings. I think, I have a feeling you and I read it the same way, that it was only to put a sidewalk there where there's a facility. But you're really talking about two types of sidewalks, the one along the road and the one into the building, right? Okay.
It just clicked with me. too. The exact, yeah. So if after roadway and it said 5-foot sidewalk again, to repeat it,
Yes,
I think that would
yes.
clarify the statement.
Would you like me to try this one? Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the recommended amendments with the further language in proposed section 16 to read in full, construction of a 5-foot sidewalk along the street or roadway and a 5-foot sidewalk leading to the, I think building is the right word, not facility, but based on what John said, the wording already used. So the last word would be building, not facility.
Ms. Watkins, do you need that? You got it. Cool. So there is a motion laid before us. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Any final comment? All those in favor, we'll take a roll.
Ms. O'Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Wise,
Yes.
Mr. Davenport,
Yes.
Mr. Patterson,
Yes.
Mr. Crute, Dr. Miller.
Yes.
All righty. So we will now seek a motion to close this public participation, or public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All righty. Number 10 on our agenda, public hearing CUP 24-001, Hybrid Solar LLC's request for a conditional use permit to allow for a utility service, major utility scale solar facility per town code section 29-22.a. The 131-acre site is located at the terminus of Cedar Avenue northeast of its intersection with East Second Street on parcel 002-4000-0A00-006. This property is zone R3 high density residential. Is there a motion to open this public hearing?
So move.
Second.
It has been moved in second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All righty, staff report.
Thank you. So the town of Farmville has received a conditional use permit request for a 12-megawatt solar energy facility proposed to be located in the residential R3 district. This is the first request the town has received for this type of facility. The town of Farmville zoning ordinance does not establish specific standards for solar energy facilities. Staff has referenced the Prince Edward County Code, Appendix B, Article 7, Alternative Energy Facilities to guide conditions in applicant submittals. The 131-acre site is located at the end of Cedar Avenue, northeast of its intersection with East 2nd Street on parcel 0024000A00006. The site is currently privately owned with one residence and is mainly forested terrain. The parcel contains a power line easement and an access road for this utility. The applicant proposes the solar use to be limited to approximately 79 acres of the 131-acre site, with the remaining unused parcel consisting of existing transmission line easement, existing residents with access, floodplain, wetlands, streams, forested land, and setbacks. So the zoning ordinance considerations for this project is that it is a utility service major, which is permitted by conditional use permit in the R3 high-density district pursuant to the zoning use matrix in section 2922A. From looking at the comprehensive plan for considerations, the current land use of the parcel is R3, residential, high-density neighborhood, and the future land use map in the comprehensive plan shows this area as urban residential, which is high-density as well. The comprehensive plan does not specifically address solar facilities. No structures requiring connection to town water and sewer systems are proposed for this solar facility. Traffic impacts will be most noticeable during construction of the facility. According to the applicant, the types of vehicles expected to be accessed in the site during construction include equipment hauling trucks, passenger vehicles, fuel delivery vehicles, and material delivery trucks. No oversized or overweight loads are anticipated. Staff has discussed best routes to the site and provided the applicant with contact information for the Department of Public Works. The site does include areas within the floodplain, wetlands, and streams. On the preliminary site plan, the applicant shows a 100-foot buffer around those areas. Stormwater and erosion and sediment control plans will be required as part of the conditions to the conditional use permit. The applicant has submitted an economic and fiscal impact report that is included in your attachments. Staff finds that the application appears to meet the standards of review for conditional use permits set forth in Section 2913C1 of the town zoning ordinance. The staff recommends the Planning Commission submit a recommendation of approval to Town Council for the conditional use permit for the utility service major or utility scale solar facility with the following conditions. The conditions were listed in Attachment 1. And I wanted to kind of give you a little overview so you know exactly where this parcel is located. This is a screenshot from Google Maps to show the entrance as that gravel drive. This is looking at the site from the end of Highlawn Avenue. It would be past that tree line behind those units. This is a picture from the applicant that shows what the parcel looks like once you enter off of that gravel road at the end of Cedar Avenue. And there's another picture of the entrance off of Cedar Avenue. This is a preliminary site plan. The staff had met with the applicant to discuss several of the conditions prior so that we kind of had something to bring to Planning Commission. So this shows the 75-foot buffer around the project with a 50-foot vegetative buffer. The applicant is here and they will give more detailed information about the site plan. At this time, we have not received any public comments on this project. I can answer any questions.
Is this a good time? Any questions for Ms. Alston?
Ashley, can you please summarize for us the brief discussion we had before this meeting, why the town staff feels that a substantial accord review or Section 2232 review is not needed here, not required here, which otherwise would be required by the Virginia Code, not the town code, but the state code?
What's the 2232?
2232.
What is that?
Yeah, let me explain. So it's, the Virginia Code section is 15.2, 2232. And so often it's just referred to as a 2232 review or a substantial accord review. And I'm paraphrasing, but what it requires is for a project like this, that the Planning Commission and Town Council have basically an advertised public hearing. It could be contemporaneous with this hearing. It could be at the same time, to review the project to see if it's in substantial accord with the comprehensive plan. It's a separate review from the special permit or conditional use permit review. I know it seems like there's an overlap, but the purpose of the 2232 review is really to focus on, does the proposed project fit with the comprehensive plan of the locality, town, city, county, whatever. It's not unique to Farmville. It's a statewide statute. And in fairness to the applicant, I know they may want to address this too, but typically when you have a solar project, or any utility project, it's not limited to solar either, there has to be an advertised hearing for this substantial accord / 2232 review, which again could be at the same time as the special use permit request or the conditional use permit request. Ashley and the applicant have already talked about the issue, so I just wanted to put on record why we're not having a substantial accord review right now, which we would otherwise be having. I hope that was a fair summary.
I think so. I did read that code section, and I'm trying to remember, is it mandatory? I wasn't sure. I don't think it was mandatory.
Yeah, it's mandatory, but with exceptions. But I don't think, just from the record, none of the exceptions apply here, but maybe the applicant has a different view of, yeah, it does fall within an exception. But for one exception would be if solar is allowed by right in this zone, then you don't need a substantial accord review. But it's not by right here, because that's why we're sitting here having a hearing on a special use permit. There are two other exceptions. And one of them, which may be applicable here, is that the locality, meaning the town in this case, has waived the requirement for the solar facility to be reviewed for a substantial accord. So if the town has waived that, it's just not part of the record that that was waived, and allowing us to proceed with the hearing that's before us. The other of the three exceptions doesn't apply, which would basically be if the solar project was being built to serve a house on that site, you know, not as opposed to power going into the grid, et cetera. And, you know, this is 12 megawatts, so that's way more than adequate to serve the house that's there. So the one exception that may apply, and it's fine if it does, I'm not objecting if it does apply, is that if Farmville has waived the requirement for the substantial accord. And I looked in the town code, I couldn't find anything saying, oh, we don't need to do that.
No, we did not have anything related to solar facilities in our town ordinance or in our comprehensive plan. So we've, trying to work this out without having any guidance. I did talk with the applicant about the 2032 review, and we felt like we didn't need to do one since it was not mentioned at all in our comprehensive plan for solar facilities. We have not done anything on record to say it was waived. I think we could look into that, but we have not produced a document to say we waived that review.
Right, and I'm not trying to create an issue that doesn't exist. I just know from, being on the County Planning Commission and we've looked at, I don't know how many of these projects now, I lost count. Whether we had a siting agreement or not, or rev share agreement, whatever, we've always done the substantial accord review. But we've always scheduled it alongside of the conditional use permit or special use permit hearing as well. I'm concerned about proceeding without knowing for sure. Now, maybe, I don't think the statute says this, but maybe state code allows us to do the substantial accord review after this hearing, as opposed to with it or before it. But, I don't know the answer to that question. But I just wanted to flag the issue just to make sure it's on the record that we're number one, we're aware of this requirement, but if it's been waived or otherwise doesn't apply, so be it.
Any other comment to what Mr. Weiss has raised or to staff? Well, let's do we want to do a presentation? Or is that going to be a part of public participation?
We have a item on the agenda for the applicant to present you guys. Okay.
Any public participation?
No, sir.
anyone in the audience that would care to offer public participation? All righty, we'll now do the applicant presentation.
Cameron, but
Yeah.
because of what was brought up, if this is procedural, yeah, we can do this part of it for sure.
Yeah.
This is informative.
I think we're gonna need to come back to what Mr. Weiss has raised. My thought was to do that during our deliberation. Because I would like to hear if you all will address that. Yeah. Thank you.
Printed these out just in case. They are small because we are trying to be sustainable. And we can make all this huge, right? Thank you. I have no idea how to work this. Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for your time this evening. If I may, I'd like to just kind of open with the concern about the 2232 review. With the lack of the ordinance, we have been working, with the town to try to establish what the standards should be for the application. We have sought legal counsel on this. Unfortunately, our legal counsel could not be here this evening. The comments that she shared with us were that I can read directly. While a 2232 review is required where a locality approves a siting agreement, the solar project is deemed to satisfy the 2232 review process. While localities may follow this process, a few may still require the 2232 even where there is a siting agreement. So in consideration of this, in the siting agreement that we are negotiating, we have tried to address that. We do also have comments throughout this presentation to address how we feel that we do comply with the siting agreement, with the comprehensive plan. And the siting agreement does say that pursuant to Virginia Code 15.2-2316.9C, this agreement shall deem the solar project to be substantially in accord with the comprehensive plan of the town, thereby satisfying the requirements of the code 2232. And 1 second, I do have that exact section. Approval of a siting agreement by the local governing body in accordance with subsection B of section 15.2-2316.8 shall deem the solar project or energy storage project to be substantially in accord with the comprehensive plan of the host locality, thereby satisfying the requirement of section 15.2-2232. I will say in our experience throughout multiple municipalities, we've really seen it addressed in multiple manners. We have done it directly in the siting agreement. We've done separate 2232 reviews from CUP applications. We've done it in unison. So it is a decision, as our council has advised us, that the Planning Commission is able to make. And again, just to make sure that we covered all of our bases, that's why she was proposing that that language be included within the siting agreement. So having said that, if it's okay, I'll go ahead and go into the presentation. And I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Alexandria Walling. I'm here from Innovative Solar, representing the project High Bridge Solar. So we will start with, sorry, my slides got a little bit backwards. The applicant is High Bridge Solar LLC. This LLC is a project LLC. It is owned by North Carolina Renewable Energy, an affiliate of Innovatus Solar. North Carolina Renewable Energy and Innovatus Solar were both purchased in 2021 to come under a full development, engineering, procurement, and construction firm, merging all of our capabilities and rebranded under Innovatus Solar. We just want to be very clear and transparent of who we are. So we're here today requesting the conditional use permit to develop the 20 megawatt solar project. The parcel is approximately 131 acres, and it is currently zoned, as mentioned, as high-density residential R3. Currently, there is one residence on the parcel, which will remain. I don't necessarily want to go too far into the location. I think that you've covered that very, very great. Thank you very much. I do want to say that there was a lot of consideration in selecting the site. It started with reviewing the existing grid. This is a distribution project connecting to the Dominion Energy distribution line that runs within the transmission corridor. There is a transmission line there, so some people have confused that, but we are going to be directly with Dominion Energy. So we reviewed the site for load needs and the capacity on the existing grid. We also took into consideration soil character, trying to abide by the comprehensive plan, and also many environmental factors, and have performed a number of studies related to that. We can go into that in a little more detail if you have any questions. This is the proposed site plan. You guys have had a view of that. What we'd really like to call out is we are doing 75-foot setbacks across the along the entire parcel boundary. This does include a 50-foot vegetative buffer. We are proposing to maintain the existing vegetative buffer. As you saw from the pictures, it is mature vegetation that does provide the best form of screening for the project. We've also performed wetland delineations and worked with WDR to establish proper setbacks. So with those setbacks, we're proposing, and this has been, again, we've spoke with WDR about this, 300-foot setbacks from the Appomattox River, 100-foot setbacks from wetlands and intermittent streams, and 200-foot setbacks from perennial streams, in addition to the 75-foot setbacks across the property boundaries. So if you look back at the site plan, where the majority of any existing residential areas are, and also we did speak with the Public Works Director today, and we're able to clear that in that wetland area is where you'll see there were some pipes and sewage piping, so we are well set back from all of those. So we do have a natural setback on the majority of the site. You will also notice that to the northwest of the project, that is where the water treatment plant is. That project itself has its own existing buffer. We've gone over the landscaping that we've planned for this, and we do propose that the solar panels will not exceed 15 feet. We believe that they will be well below that, but just we are meeting the standards that we've kind of tried to model after Prince Edward County. We will be instituting a number of erosion and sediment controls. I would like to actually defer to our civil engineer from Kimley Horn for more specifics on that matter.
Good evening. My name is Sean Mallow. I work with Kimley Horn and Associates, civil engineering firm here in Virginia. We've worked on many solar projects, so I'll just go through a couple of basics on erosion, sediment control, and stormwater, and I'll also touch on decommissioning a little bit. If you guys have any other detailed questions, be glad to jump into that, but just don't want to bore you too much with a bunch of engineering speak. But to get started, we'll prepare the site and design the erosion sediment control facilities to protect the perimeter of the project through ditches and ponds, which are pretty common, silt fence, filter socks, other common erosion and sediment control measures prior to the major start of construction. We will implement additional measures. So we've been working on solar in Virginia since 2017 at Kimley Horn. So we've established other standards that are above the state standards to additionally protect solar-specific projects, because we've just noticed there's different things that our contractors need to do in order to protect sites like solar projects. The main difference being just the large open area that gets disturbed. There's things we need to do within that area to help protect the site. And I can go into those details if you'd like. And as construction progresses, we will be converting over most of the ditching and the basins that were constructed for erosion sediment control. We'll be converting those over to stormwater facilities. So we intend to keep all those perimeter controls in place throughout the life of the project. So as the site gets stabilized, as construction finishes, those devices will be converted over to permanent stormwater. And with those facilities, we'll be able to meet the state and county regulations for quantity and quality. So first, we will be reducing the amount of water leaving the project and the peak flow rate so that downstream properties will actually see a decrease in that peak flow rate. That's the code we have to follow. There's no leniency there. Related to the quality of the water leaving the project, obviously today it's a forested site. We do have to take that into consideration as we do our calculations to convert that over to essentially a meadow will be the final condition for the solar facility. So we'll run all those proper calculations. On site, we may have on-site treatment options to treat the water before it leaves the project. Again, through some of those ditches and basins that will be converted over from the erosion and sediment control phase. The state does allow other measures such as the purchase of nutrient credits. And as you'll notice on our site plan, probably the biggest thing we'll be doing is preserving a lot of trees throughout the project. And that does serve as well as sort of a treatment method as water has to go through those treat areas that will treat the water before it leaves. And again, all of our measures will be designed in accordance to state and county codes and reviewed and approved through those agencies as well, the counties or Prince Edward County. So that's all I have on that. You want to switch to the next one? And then, so for decommissioning, so after the life of the project, which we anticipate to be over 35 years, we've modeled the project as far as like how long we need to operate, or Innovatus will need to operate and maintain the facility for 40 years. At the end of the life of the project, we will remove the complete facility. So all the panels, racking, what's connected, all that together, steel piles supporting all of that, all the wiring, the other electrical equipment that is out there will be removed, and we will restore the property back to the original condition as we can, or potentially leave it as a meadow, since that will be the case at the end of the life of the project. Most of the facility will be a mature meadow at that phase. During construction or deconstruction of the project, decommissioning, soils that do get compacted, we will decompact to help restore the absorption rate of that natural soil. And in those areas that do get disturbed, we will provide seeding and restabilize those areas. Per the conditions and I think the requirements, we have 1 year to complete decommissioning. That should not be a problem for this type of project. And the cost associated with the decommissioning will be covered by a bond for the life of that project held by a third party, much similar to erosion control bonds and other bonds that are posted for projects like these. So that's all I have to say for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And I would like to add to that we have looked at the standards of Prince Edward County to try to model some of our proposal on the decommissioning. And we also will be subject to further state regulations under the PBR process, since we are a 12 megawatt site. So we will move on to compliance with the Town of Farmville Comprehensive Plan. The development of the project conforms with the stated objective of develop appropriate stormwater and environmental standards for all new developments that protect local and environmental resources. We feel that the following development restrictions directly support this objective. The proposed project will has evaluated the topography when determining the usable land to minimize disturbances on steep slopes and minimize erosion and sedimentation. And as we had mentioned before, the 200-foot buffer will be maintained from the river on the south border of the the north border of the parcel, and a 300-foot buffer will be maintained from a river on the north border of the parcel, and a 100-foot buffer will be maintained around the wetlands, streams, and 100-year FEMA floodplain present on the site. With regard to the comprehensive plan's vision to actively build a diversified economy that serves the many needs of Farmville citizens and is an economic engine for the region, the project will provide employment opportunities during construction, and once operational will have established quality utilities and infrastructure to support long-lasting economic growth and development in the town. We did submit a fiscal and economic impact report that was done by a third party, Mangum Economics. They covered quite a number of items within that report. They reviewed the state production profile, also reviewed how unemployment is within the town of Farmville. When we did that report, that was prior to the adoption of revenue share, so we did have them model 2 different scenarios for taxation, and that was what revenue share would bring in for tax revenue, or if we were to be taxed for the M&T rate. Those numbers can be found on that report, which is attached, and also available on our public website that has information about this project. The one thing we would like to highlight is that with the new classification of the land under the solar panels, it would bring the town revenue for the real estate tax to $30,600 over the next 40 years. And in addition to that, there would be the revenue share income that would generate over $1 million in revenue over the 40 years of the project. And this is comparable to just $12,600 for the current use. In addition to that, we've also submitted a third-party study on the impact on property values surrounding the project. This is supported by university studies and local property information. This was done by Kirkland Appraisals, and they deemed that there would be no impact on the surrounding property values. So we will move on to, this is a slide. What I would like to highlight about this slide is those pretty little pictures, and the round pictures there are actual pictures from sites that we have built that are being maintained. We did hold a community meeting about this project on March 6th. This was posted in the Farmville Herald, and we did send out mailers to the surrounding neighbors to try to share this kind of information with everybody. In addition to all of this, again, we do want to say that feedback is encouraged. We know we will be a neighbor within the town. We feel that we are ideally located on that border right there, and also on a parcel with an existing transmission line that does limit some of the uses, and we're going to still maintain the residential residence there. So we do have an email address where people can email us with direct questions so we can answer from engineering or development perspective. And we have made a website live, so all of the materials that we've gone over today, including additional materials, are available on that website and will remain to be, along with updates about the project. So last, to try to wrap up, I would like to share that we have completed a number of studies on the project. Of course, once we get local approval, we will move on through the state level studies and approvals. So some of those studies include a critical issues analysis, a LIDAR and topographic survey, hydrology study, wetland delineation, threatened and endangered species assessment, a preliminary jurisdiction determination by the Army Corps of Engineers. We have done preliminary geotech. Of course, we will do more geotech when we get closer to construction. Title report, and we have completed a system impact and feasibility combined study with Dominion. Any questions?
Any questions for our applicant?
Actually, I did have a question about that meeting that was March 6th. Of just what was the participation from the community? Were there questions? What were their concerns?
So the community meeting was held at the local library. which is escaping me at the moment, the name of it.
Barbara Rose Johns, Farmville, Prince Edward
I'm sorry.
Community Library.
It was held in the evening. We did post in the newspaper and sent out the mailers. We have also shared the mailing list. Unfortunately, no one attended, except for the esteemed Mr. Weiss. We were glad to have him and tried to give him all the hundreds of donuts that we had there available for the community. We've been a little bit shocked that we haven't received more feedback. Normally, we don't even have to post in newspapers for some of our developments, and we're really hoping to answer some questions for everybody.
Well, thank you for having the meeting, and I do apologize, I was not able to be there, but I was interested to know what had happened, so thank you.
You're very welcome. And again, so that if the community, didn't hear about it or wants another way to be able to contact us, we do have the website with all of this information and a way to reach us.
Perfect. We'll call you back
Okay.
if there are any questions.
Thank you.
But we'll move back into deliberation and
Was there anyone else speaking?
no. Anyone else, public comment? Cool. Cool. Turning it back to the commission.
I guess to come back to the appropriateness of deliberating on this and moving forward on this, and, I heard the, I heard the developers, comment about siting agreements. And so I guess I got to, and if you can forgive my ignorance, but like, A, what is a siting agreement? And B, isn't it our responsibility as commissioners to make the determination of compatibility? I appreciate your lawyer doing their job but I guess isn't that our responsibility?
I'm going to say your responsibility is to make sure it meets the conditional use permit, which part of that review is looking at the comprehensive plan to see if you believe that it meets the comprehensive plan. So that's part of our review here. You had a second part to your question.
I guess, what's the definition of a siting agreement?
I don't know the definition of the siting agreement, but it does not come to Planning Commission. It goes straight to Town Council.
So what does the Code of Virginia say then about this, is a siting agreement equivalent to the 15.2.2232?
I'm torn about what to say here because I'm trying to wear my commissioner hat and not the fact I'm also a lawyer. I don't represent the town as a lawyer in this, nor do I represent the applicant. So I just want to be clear, I'm not giving legal advice, number one, and two, my comments aren't about the merits of the project, about is solar good or bad, or is it good at this location or bad at this location. That's not, I don't want anyone to take my comments that way. But wearing my commissioner hat and just having been through a number of these 2232 reviews in other places, I do have a concern that we're proceeding without meeting the statutory requirements, the state statute, not the town code. I realize the town code is largely silent about solar projects, but the state code is not silent about it, about them. And so I'm again, to be fair to everybody, I'm just trying to think of the best way to proceed. And as I was listening to the presentation, I was coming up with the possibility that given that we don't have a siting agreement, it's to be negotiated. So if it may happen, but it's going to happen after tonight. I'm wondering if I can articulate a motion better, but I'm just thinking out loud here. If we can, as a planning commission, defer this until we get appropriate legal advice from the town attorney that we don't need to do the 2232 review, provided that at some point in the future, the town council does approve the siding agreement, which by some other statute waives this statute. I'm not aware of that other statute. I'm not aware where the applicant's lawyer is coming up with this position. It may be a perfectly valid position. I'm not trying to take issue with the position, but just in the here and now, you know, the state code does require this 2232 review of us about substantial accord with the comprehensive plan. That review has not been advertised to the public. The public did not have notice of that. The public had notice of the conditional use permit. And as Ashley correctly points out, part of that review is how does this fit with the comprehensive plan? If that by itself were sufficient, we wouldn't have this Virginia Code section that requires a substantial accord review. So the best I can come up with to sort of accommodate everybody and keep the process moving is to craft a motion that, you know, basically either we make a decision as a body subject to legal counsel saying, yeah, it's okay that we didn't also have the 2232 review, or do we just table this until we know? You know, so in other words, the motion could be conditioned on that opinion coming out, or we just table it, just, you know, hold time out until we know whether we can proceed or not.
My personal thought would be to go with the first recommendation. We make the decision that we would make as a body just based on what's presented before us. I think that still gives staff, our council, the opportunity to make that determination. If the determination is made that we needed that review, council can always make the decision to send the project back to us.
Exactly.
But, you know, I do think after we consider this, I do think we should just kind of deal with the fact that maybe our ordinances should be updated to just kind of reflect where folks are moving related to solar.
I believe we can go through this in completion, subject to, like, under the assumption that this isn't needed or the town has already waived that in a way. I think we can go through this entire process basically until completion unless we're told wrong, where I think town council could send this back. And that's how I would prefer to go through with this, because, yeah, I think basically I read through the 2232 part as well, and I'm like unclear on, like, okay, is it the town manager, is it the town council, or is it the town staff? How does that, if they waive it, I don't even know that our process is clear how that would get waived. And I do know there's some minimal ones, but they're really small, where the town manager has that authority. But I'm like, but I think as a body, we can go through this to completion and discuss it, assuming that the town has waived that need. And then if we find out otherwise, then we can come back and go through the process of it.
Happy, John? Any?
Let's send it.
Cool. Well, is there any additional deliberation that would cause folks to get to a point of the motion?
I have a question for Ashley, unrelated to 2232, which is, in your view, is this the highest and best use of this property in R3?
I don't foresee that this property would be subdivided into a high-density residential area. I think at this point in time, a solar farm, solar utility would be beneficial for this area.
I'm pretty sure I've read it, but if not, I'll state it. All the adjacent property owners have been mailed and notified of the project. Yeah.
I did have one kind of technical question about the conditions attached to it. These are conditions, and it was specifically about the noise. These conditions apply to the operation of the facility, right? Or do they apply to the construction and the operation of the facility? I guess, like, my question was, it says it shall be, operated at no less than 50 decibels, which, again, looking at some of the supporting documentation that they shared, it seems like that's eminently reasonable. But I imagine, like, when you're building it with the construction noise, that would exceed that. So I'm assuming this is just the operation of the facility?
I would say this is an operation, but I think we could ask Ms. Walling, is that a possibility that during construction, it could exceed that noise level?
Yes, it could. So during construction, the loudest part of construction will be the pile driving. This pile driving does eliminate the need for other disturbances to the ground. That would be for a limited amount of time. We're happy to work with, we will be required in the conditions to put together that construction schedule. If everything goes beautifully, that could be limited to 2 to 3 weeks. It could go as long as 2 months, maybe. That would not really seem the case for a 12 megawatt project. But again, those would be limited to construction hours and would be for a limited time.
I just want to make sure, like this, covered or accommodated the need for louder days during construction. That's all.
And the 50 decibel level that is in the conditions, that is absolutely reasonable
Right.
for the operation of the facility. We have performed noise studies on other projects in the past, and we were able to meet those standards, especially in consideration of the site. We will try to push any inverters or anything that can make any kind of noise more central within the project. And with the existing vegetation so high and dense, we don't anticipate there really to be any sound outside of the site besides construction. The things you hear about sound is usually for a bigger project that requires much bigger transformers and substations, not for a distribution level project.
Any other questions? Perfect. We'll welcome a motion if folks have one to make.
So tell me if I'm getting this right with everybody's, with what everybody was saying, but it seems like, where's that dang piece of paper? Give me that piece of paper. Get that piece of paper. Oh, man, the one with the motion on it. Oh, there it is, okay. I make a motion that we recommend approval on CUP 24-001 Hybrid Solar LLC's request for conditional use permit to allow for utility service major per town code section 29.22A. Subject to approval from the town attorney with respect to compliance with 2232 regulations.
Can you amend that to add with the conditions listed in attachment?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. With the conditions listed. Is that right?
technical point be that 2232 is a statute, not a regulation.
Oh, statute with the
Or
22,
requirements, 2232 requirements.
with 2232 requirements, forgive me.
Ms. Watkins, do you have it?
I move. Oh, okay. Oh, subject to approval from the town attorney with respect to compliance with 2232 requirements.
Is there a second to that?
Second?
Alrighty. All those in favor of the motion before you, we'll have a roll call.
Ms. O'Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Weiss,
I'm going to abstain for the reasons for the concerns I stated earlier.
okay. Could you make that clear?
My concerns over whether we're supposed to be complying now with Virginia Code Section 15.2, 2232.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Davenport,
Yes.
Mr. Patterson,
Yes.
Mr. Crude, Dr. Miller,
Yes.
Alrighty. Thank you all. So we have no old business before us. New business, we have some staff and department updates.
So staff updates. At the last town council meeting, town council appointed Ms. Fraley as the new planning commission member for Ward A. She is in the audience today, and we will have her onboarded before our next meeting. Please welcome Ms. Fraley.
Congratulations, Ms. Fraley. Welcome to the Farmville Planning Commission. We look forward to your service.
And a second staff update, Ms. Watkins is now a certified permit technician. She has passed her ICC exam. We are extremely proud of her progress.
Congratulations, Ms. Watkins.
That is all the staff updates at this time.
Perfect. Any items from commission members? Other items of interest? If not, we have reached item 13 on our agenda, adjournment. All those in favor of adjourning for the evening signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good night and good luck.